As a big fan of toys, I'm also a big fan of parents. I'm a big fan of my parents. My parents were always so supportive, and if it wasn't for them buying me He-Man and Star Wars and Transformer toys when I was a kid, I probably wouldn't have grown up to get to work in toys. And I mean, heck, it's right there in most Western religions about honoring thy father and mother. But there's a big difference between loving your parents and loving what they like. Now, why am I talking about this in a toy channel? Well, this is Scott Toy Guru Neitich. I've been in the toy industry for over 25 years making toys, and I'm also a big collector. And I like to share my perspective, and this channel has kind of become a big part of that. So let's talk about old toys versus, I guess you could say, new toys, current toys. And the differences aren't just electronics or new types of plastic or, feature-based. It really is about the emotional connection to now. What do I mean by this? Well, to explain, let's talk a little bit about the Cola Wars. And yes, don't worry, I will get back to toys. You're probably saying, why are we talking about soda? Well, if you were around in the 1980s or you watched the History Channel documentary, you're aware that the Cola Wars was essentially a fight between Coke and Pepsi for domination of the soft drink market. Now, in the end, Pepsi kind of won, only in the sense that Pepsi family of products actually outsell Coke products today, but Coke actually outsells Pepsi, so maybe it's a draw. Coke had based its advertising and continued to do so during the Cola Wars on nostalgia. Coca-Cola had been around for over 100 years, and it was seen as an all-American drink. It was seen as patriotic. It was seen as part of our culture and heritage. And a big part of that is because the U.S. government shipped Coca-Cola, along with other things like Hershey bars, to troops during World War II as a reminder of home. And when these troops came home and started a family, well, Coke became the brand of soft drink that they continued to purchase. It was honestly a brilliant move on Coca-Cola's part, helping to get Coca-Cola to our troops overseas. Now, Pepsi, on the other hand, they took a different approach. They basically went the opposite way. It was all about the now, sex appeal, the future. Pepsi wanted to clearly put its flag and say, we're different. We are all about what's new about you. This is not mom and dad's soft drink. That was for them, and
yes, and it's the choice of a new generation.
So, how does this relate to toys? Well, much like what was happening in the quote-unquote Cola Wars, today we have a lot of parents who grew up and are now adult collectors. And we want to share our love for the properties that we loved with our kids. But there's a big difference between sharing the love and kind of dragging them along with you unwillingly. So let me explain a little bit. Kids want to, or actually do, naturally emulate their parents. They want to like what they like, they want to be like them, they see them as their heroes, and we're not going to get into a whole Freudian thing, even though my wife is a therapist, and I get to hear about all of that. But let's just go with a more base level, is that kids look up to their parents. They're their first teachers, they're their number one heroes. Well, kids also want to feel a sense of ownership, because children are told constantly what to do, when to go to school, when to go to sleep, what to eat, how to celebrate Arbor Day, how to grade their cheese, and the ability to select their own type of enjoyment is, shall we say, something that empowers them. So while we do want to share our love for properties we grew up with our kids, much like with Pepsi, kids want to plant their own flag and say, this is my generation. I'm new, I'm unique, I'm different from my parents. So I bring this up because there are quite a few toy lines that are marketing to kids, or rather to parents, as, hey, this is a toy line you should share with your kids. Mattel does this currently with the Masters of the Universe Origins line. And another great example is the Episode 7 Force Awakens line was very much about parents introducing Star Wars to their kids. They had commercials where kids, save the house from an AT-AT attack, or AT-AT. We can call it an AT-AT, otherwise it's an AT-ST, right? With the chicken walker. Okay, never mind. Point being is that both the current Motu Origins line and the Episode 7 line were all about passing the torch, taking an older generation and saying, I'm going to introduce my kids, the next generation, to what I loved. When the prequels came out, most Star Wars generation fans were in college. Well, now with the new Disney movies, Star Wars fans who grew up with it in the 70s and 80s have their own kids. And while we do kind of see our kids turning out just like ourselves, they are unique, they are different, and especially when they become teenagers, they're going to, I don't want to call it rebel, but, rebel. What we really need to do as parents is understand our children and realize that they're unique human beings. They are not clones of us. When we grew up in the 80s, when Star Wars came out, and G.I. Joe, and Transformers, and Masters of the Universe, these were brand new things, and they were amazing. And the reason they were so popular is because they were new. It wasn't just a rehash of what mom and dad had when they grew up in the 50s and 60s. This was something for our generation. Now, obviously, there are some things that are timeless, that kind of never change, are, around forever. For example, Fisher-Price Little People. Yes, they've evolved over time, but they're still sold in toy aisles today, just like they were in the 1950s. Granted, they don't really look like pegs anymore. Or even, novelty toys like, Crazy Hair Guy with the magnets. I'm sure you probably played with Wooly Willy when you were a kid, and it's still around now. Same thing with Mr. Potato Head. But kids don't want Mr. Potato Head from the 1960s, when he was actually a potato. They want their own version. They want the current version. Same thing with something like a Barbie doll. Barbie is an evergreen brand. It's a billion-dollar brand for Mattel, but kids don't want this Barbie. Collectors might, but kids in the 80s wanted this Barbie, the new Barbie, the one that was all about their generation, because toys are a way of kids expressing themselves. So let's look at some deeper examples. When it really comes down to is IP, intellectual property. So toys that were really big in the 50s that were about new IP, example, Howdy Doody, right? The Howdy Doody record player, huge toy in the 50s. Or the David Crockett Frontier outfit, very, very big toy in the 50s because, like Howdy Doody, Davy Crockett was a new IP. It was the hot show on television. So Walt Disney could sell their Davy Crockett Indian fighter hat. Oh God, I feel like I'm going to get canceled just for showing this image. Okay, let's move on to something else. Quickly, please. Thank you. All right, so along comes the 80s, and we don't see a push for Davy Crockett and Howdy Doody toys. Kids want something new. So now here we are in 2021, and Mattel has introduced Masters of Origins, which personally I think is awesome as a collector, as a He-Man fan, as a former brand manager of He-Man. And the Origins figures that are aimed for the collector, the ones that are sold at conventions, not the ones sold at retail, these are, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, He-Man fans at a convention, adult collectors, honestly, in a way, they'll buy anything for the brand they love if it's in a form factor they love. Something like the world's smallest He-Man, right? That's not aimed at kids, that's aimed at the adult collector and tugging on nostalgia. Well, kids don't have nostalgia for He-Man. And that's a big reason you see Origins sitting on pegs and, peg warming, if you will, to use the parlance of our times. Thank you, Big Lebowski. Well, actually, I guess he was quoting George Bush, but that's not important right now. The point is it's hard to sell nostalgia to people who didn't grow up with it because they don't experience it. There's always going to be Star Wars fans. There's always going to be adults who remember the movies and want every obscure character in toy form. Probably no one's more obscure than good old Wilro Hood, the ice cream maker guy. Not important right now. That's covered in another video. The point being is kids today and every generation wants their own thing because it's a reflection of who they are as individuals. They don't want to be seen as just their parents. When we grew up in the 80s, we didn't want Howdy Doody. And the adult collector market, while it is vocal and loud online, it is very small from a financial standpoint as far as the total toy industry. And all toys that are sold at retail have to earn their keep. Everything is measured by square foot. So the more pegs you have, the more you are required to earn for the retailer. And that's the reason why the number one monetary category is preschool toys. They bring in about 60% of the total revenue for the toy industry. This is where the money is. This is where the focus of toy companies are, because that's where they can make their profit. So again, Star Wars toys will probably always be around, but the property, the reason the new movies haven't been huge with kids is a lot of ways it's seen as nostalgic, and kids aren't nostalgic for Star Wars, nor are they nostalgic for Masters of the Universe. When they see these properties, it's like, well, maybe I can see why you liked them, Mom and Dad, but I have Fortnite, I have Poppets, I have, fidget toys, which is, crazy that those are the most popular toys now. Kids want their own brand, and trying to have kids embrace nostalgia for something they don't have nostalgia for and weren't old enough to experience does not always lead to success. And very much like Pepsi promoted it as the choice of a new generation, that's the way children choose toys too. They don't want what Mom and Dad grew up with. They may think it's neat, but it's not going to be something that excites them. They need their own concept. So my conclusion is it's time for something new. If you want kids buying toys, we need to bring them new IP, new entertainment, and new toys to play with so they can celebrate their own generation. We'll always have adult collectors, and older brands can ride out into the sunset and always find a home with adult collectors online and at conventions. But for the toy aisle, newness sells. And that's why we need more new properties for more new kids in this new world. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please do give the channel a subscription and a like, because it tells YouTube to share it with more people. It's how their algorithm works. Thanks so much for watching. Comments below, I always answer every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Spector Creative.